I wanted to give you some instructions for the final project in this class because it's so important. First of all, be sure that you check the due date and make it by that due date because I have to turn grades in and there's no way there's any wiggle room on this one. The final project is worth 35 points and I'll go through those in a minute. It's a requirement for all FinalProjectEYP721 classes, so this isn't something that I just made up, but it's an opportunity for you to synthesize what you've learned in this course. This project requires you to go back through the entire course and use pieces you've learned about, and you will do several kinds of analyses. Your finished project is actually a paper that you turn in to me, and it answers 4 research questions. I expect it to be done with APA style, and I expect you to turn in the SPSS printouts that match your answers. So let's start out by looking at the data set that you're going to have. When you open the data set provided, this is what you have in the variable view. Let's go quickly through each one of these. You can see that you have the gender for the student. You've got an ethnicity, which is whether they're classified as white or not. There's a free and reduced lunch characteristic that you've got, and remember that that's a measure of poverty. Then you've got a whether they're classified in the state of Pennsylvania as special ed or not. This data comes out of a district in Pennsylvania. Track means they're either a student in a regular track or a slow track. So you may be able to use that later on. Then you have 4 scores, which are their quarter scores on their math tests. And finally, you have a final grade in their math class. Then there's one that's called units complete. These are the cognitive tutor units that the students did. So how many each student did. And finally, you've got their math scores on a standardized test that's used in the state of Pennsylvania. The first 3 research questions are pretty straightforward. So, does the number of cognitive tutor units a student completes predict achievement in math? Do students' grades in their math course increase from the first to the last quarter? And do students in the regular track complete more cognitive tutor units during the course of the year than students in the slower track? In answering all of these research questions and number 4, use a 0.05 level of significance. For each question, you have to decide what analysis you're going to do to answer it. You're going to need to provide a rationale for that analysis, then choose the data to use, and then run the analysis and save your output. And then you'll be reporting your results, and your results always must include a test statistic and probability statement. And finally, you'll be interpreting your results. Now let's look specifically at question 4 because it's a little more open-ended, and you're going to have to actually determine what data to use in answering the questions. I think I would approach it by making a list of all the student characteristics I have data for, because it's asking me how do student characteristics affect their performance in math. So I need to start by figuring out what the student characteristics are. Then I'd make a list of the dependent variables I have, in other words, the measures I've got. That way I could decide which DVs I would use to define math performance. For a hint, math performance could consist of several different things. It could be the performance on a test, plus a grade in a class, problem-solving ability, all kinds of things. So you need to look through those DVs and decide which ones you're going to use in this, quote, performance in math, quote. You're going to have to report how each of the student characteristics you choose affects the different measures you choose. There's no right or wrong answer here, but you need to run analyses on several characteristics affecting more than one DV. And a caution, always examine the actual data you have for each characteristic very carefully. I have said over and over in this class that I expect formal answers. So let me describe and give an example of what I consider a formal answer. First of all, a formal answer answers the question. So if the question is, do girls and boys read different numbers of books? The answer in a formal way would be, the difference between the number of books read by girls, mean equals 15, standard deviation equals 2.32, and boys, mean equals 16, standard deviation equals 1.78, was statistically significant. Test statistic at 39 degrees of freedom equals 3.28, and the p is equal to 0.02. Notice that I answered the question. Then I reported in my answer somewhere, I reported the descriptives, and I gave a test statistic and probability, including the degrees of freedom. All these make it a formal answer. In addition, if you do an analysis that requires it, you must report the Levine's test results too. For each question, you're going to be asked to give implications or interpret it for the real world. You simply restate your results without the technical pieces. You're interpreting, not opinionating. For example, this statement, the data does not lead to this, the data do not lead to this statement. Here's another one. The data that you've got and the results do not lead to this statement. These are, the data don't support them. Finally, I expect this to be turned in APA style. Remember that you italicize the letters which stand for something. For example, the T statistic, T that stands for the test statistic. You report the actual P. And if it comes up with P equals 0.000 from SPSS, that's reported as P is less than 0.001. You don't ever put down that the P is equal to nothing. There's always a probability out there somewhere. I do expect you to proofread for your spelling, your sentence structure, and your grammar at a graduate level. You do not need a cover sheet or references. This isn't a full-blown research paper that you're turning in. Finally, this is the rubric so that you can know which points you will get for each section. Notice that question 4, you're going to get points for choosing and giving a rationale for the variables you choose to analyze. Along with, for each question, you must choose the analysis or analyses. You must give a rationale for the analysis or analyses. You must give a formal answer, as I just described. You have to interpret your results for real people in the real world. And you must attach your SPS output or outputs. And finally, there are 5 points for it being APA style, and I'll remove points for problems that I see as I go through it. So have some fun with this. I think it could be an interesting project, and I look forward to seeing great results.